Hello, welcome to the Godly Playroom at First United Church. My name is Ruth Lomax, and it is my delight to be here to greet and welcome you into the circle. It's so good to see you. I hope you've been keeping warm, got all that yard work done before some of those white things hit this week. I wonder what you need to help you be ready to enter and be part of today's session. Sometimes it means we need to set things aside, whether those are worries or things going on in our life. Sometimes we need to gather things, our candle, our feast, our art materials. Sometimes we simply need to pause and to take a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. Maybe a second one. And one more. And when you're ready, come on in. We are into that final stretch of the green and growing season before Advent. I wonder what is growing in your life at the moment. It seems like a time of year when things are settling down, cooling off, being laid to rest. And yet there is so much learning going on in school and at work, in the community. I wonder how you're part of it all. So welcome to the room and to the circle. I wonder how you're doing today. It's a little bit frostier this week. We've even seen some of that white stuff. But hopefully things will hold out for a few more days and people can enjoy Halloween without all those extra snowsuits and costume adjustments. I wonder if you're ready to hear a story. Perhaps you want to get some things ready before we start. Know that you can pause the video at any time, but you might like to get your own candle ready. Whether that's a flame or a battery style, you might want to have something to respond to the story, some art materials or something to work with creatively. Sometimes when we hear the story, it takes a while to process, and this is one of those stories. It's got some really difficult parts in it, and it may trigger things for some people, and so know what you need to look after you. You might also like to have some feast as part of that self-care or as part of our time together today. Whenever we share a meal, however meager, it is a reminder of the one who invites us to share the great feast of life. Oh. So before we begin, let's get ready. I invite you to take another deep breath. We remember that once there was someone who said such amazing things and did such wonderful things that people began to follow him. And the more they followed him, the more they wondered who he was. And one time they just had to ask, "Who are you?" And one time when they asked him that question, he said, "I'm the light." Let's enjoy the light. There seems so little of it these days. We're getting very close to that time when we change our clocks, but not quite yet. I'm going to put the light back up on the shelf and get ready to tell the story. You're invited to do whatever you need to do to be ready, and I'll see you back here in a moment. Well, are you ready for a story? You'll find this story on the Sacred Story shelves, which is to your right as you come into the Godly Playroom, that great big long wall and line of stories. The core stories, those ones that are essential and core to who we are as the people of God, playing hide and seek with this God of no name, you'll find those along that top shelf. And as you hear more stories and go more deeply into the room, you'll find some of the other stories. Stories about the core stories or about people within those stories. This story is a story told in a godly play way, but it's not one of the godly play anthology stories. This is the story of a young girl from Egypt. Her name was Hagar. Some people think that Hagar lived in the palace of the Pharaoh. Some even wonder if she was one of the Pharaoh's daughters. What we do know is that when Avram and Sarai came into Egypt, Hagar came to belong to them. She was a helper to Sarai and had to do whatever Sarai asked of her. And when Avram and Sarai left Egypt, Hagar went with them. She was a slave. She couldn't go home. Hagar helped Avram and Sarai pitch their tents at the oaks of Mamre. She might have heard about God's promise that Avram and Sarai would become the parents of a great family, and how they laughed because they were so old and they had no children. And yet God told them to change their names, and Avram became Abraham, the father of many, and Sarai became Sarah, the mother of many. The years went by, and Sarah began to give up hope. And so one day she went to Hagar, and she said that Abraham would take Hagar as a second wife, as was the custom, and that if Hagar got pregnant and had a child, then Sarah would raise it as her own. And Hagar had to do what Sarah asked because she was a slave. Soon Hagar was expecting a child. And she was very excited and proud to be carrying the first child of Abraham. But she made fun of Sarah for not having any children. And Sarah got angry and treated Hagar so harshly that Hagar ran away into the wilderness. And while she was there, God came so close to Hagar, and Hagar came so close to God, that she knew what God was saying. An angel appeared to Hagar and said, "Where are you going?" And Hagar said, "I'm running away." The angel said, "You are going to have a child, and you will call the child Ishmael, which means God hears. And God will bless that child, and you will be part of a great family. But you have to go back." And so Hagar went back. And she gave birth to a child and named him Ishmael. A few more years went by, and Sarah gave birth to her own child. And she called the child Isaac. And she and Abraham laughed again, but this time with joy. A few more years went by, and one day Ishmael and Isaac were out playing together. And when Sarah saw them, she got angry all over again. And she told Abraham to send Hagar and Ishmael away. She wanted Isaac to be the favorite. And Abraham was very sad. He loved them all so much. But in the morning he gave Hagar and Ishmael a sack of grain and some water and sent them into the wilderness. After all the food and water was gone, Hagar tucked Ishmael under a bush and she walked away. She couldn't bear to watch her child die. She threw herself down and she cried out to God. And God came so close to Hagar, and Hagar came so close to God that she knew what God was saying. An angel appeared to Hagar and told her to get up and open her eyes. And when Hagar did, there was a spring of water. And Hagar drank from it, and she gave the child something to drink, and the child lived. And Hagar called God by her own name, El Roi, the one who sees me, because God had seen her in her trouble. And Ishmael grew, and he thrived in the wilderness. And when he was a grown man, Hagar found him a wife in Egypt. And Ishmael and his wife had children. And those children had children. And those children had children. Until they were more than the stars in the sky or grains of sand in the desert. And Hagar and Ishmael were part of that great family. I wonder what part of this story you liked best. It's not a very familiar story for many of us, although there are some things that are a little familiar. I wonder, what's the most important part of this story? I wonder if there's any part of this story we could leave out and still have all the story that we need. Sometimes families can be so difficult. And those emotions like anger and jealousy and hurt and frustration, pride, they just get in our way so often. Sometimes it helps me to think about those as signposts that point me back to coming close to God. But I don't always remember in the moment. I wonder where you are in this story. Or what part of this story is most like you? There's a lot of wondering to do in this story. I'm going to start putting it away, and you can begin to think about what you might like to work with in response. You might find some art materials around your home. Most everybody has a pen or pencil and paper. Some of us have crayons or paints or scissors and glue that we can do some cutting and pasting. You might want to go online and do some research or some thinking about what it means to be in the wilderness, or the state of modern day slavery, because it saddens us to think there are still slaves in the world. There are still people who are bought and sold. Lots to think about. Let's put the story away and then we'll do our response. We had all of those children, a great family. And the well of water is very important in the desert. Oh, and the pain for a mother and for the child. And Isaac and Ishmael. I wonder how they would have gotten along if their mothers hadn't got involved. And the angel, who are often messengers of God and remind us who we are and whose we are. There's a lot of weight to that chain. A weight that some people still feel, and that we who enjoy many freedoms that we take for granted need to be a little more mindful of others. And the underlay, which looks a bit like a piece of the desert. I'm going to get my response material ready, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. Welcome back. I wonder what you found to work with. There's all kinds of amazing things around your house that can be turned into creative things. And it doesn't have to be fancy. Sometimes just some pen and paper, or some markers or crayons. I got thinking about Hagar and what it might have been like for her to leave Egypt, fairly civilized place of living, especially if she lived in the palace where there would be water and good things, and then to go traveling with Avram and Sarai, especially as a slave. And I wondered, well, maybe her life in Egypt wasn't that great, and so going with Avram and Sarai felt like an adventure and something that they could look forward to. So I found a few things. I thought, what if we played a game instead of doing some response? Or you might want to pause the video and do your response anyway. But there's that question. If you had to leave in a hurry, what would you take with you? Some people have had to deal with that, either because of a fire or a flood. Maybe you live in an apartment building and there's been something happen and all of a sudden you have to evacuate. Most of us have been part of a fire drill at school or at church where you aren't allowed really to take anything. Teachers just make sure that you gather yourself and they get everybody out of the building as quickly as possible. But sometimes we have a little bit of time to think about what we would take. Maybe you've played that game. It's a bit of a memory game, right? Where you say, I'm going to the moon and I packed my suitcase and in my suitcase I took and you have to name something. And then the next person has to say your thing plus something they would add in. And sometimes we make a little twist on that you have to name something that ends or begins with the same letter as the previous person's word ended with. Gets all very confusing sometimes. But I thought it might not be a bad thing to think about what would we take. So I have some items here. I have a little tin cup, and I have some glitter, and I have a pipe cleaner, and a feather, a piece of chalk, some scissors, a glue stick, a roll of tape, a paintbrush, and a crayon, and a tray. The tray is going to be like my work table. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them on the tray, and then we'll see how many you can remember. So I'll hold the tray so that you can see. We'll start with, 5 things. Can we remember that many? So here we go. Don't write them down. You're just going to have to remember. There's a crayon and a glue stick and the tape and a pipe cleaner and the tin cup. So have a look at those items. And now, can you tell me what's all on the tray? A pipe cleaner, a tin cup, a crayon, the tape, and a glue stick? Oh, okay, so I managed to do 5. How did you do? I'm going to add a couple more things. So all of those things that we just said, and a paintbrush, and the scissors. So think about those. Now there are 7 things. And let's think. All right. So there's scissors and the tin cup and a pipe cleaner and a glue stick and the tape and the paintbrush and a crayon. Oh, okay. We got that many. Our memory's holding out so far. How did you do? All right, well, I'm going to add 2 more things. We're going to add the feather and the piece of chalk. So think about those 9 things now, all those things you might take. And close your eyes. I'm going to take them all off the tray, or I'll cover the tray. How did you do? feather, piece of chalk, crayon, tin cup, tape, glue stick, scissors, 2 more, a pipe cleaner. I can't remember everything I said, never mind everything that's on the tray. And then the glitter. I don't know about you, but my brain hurts just a little bit. But I wonder what you would take if you had to leave home in a hurry. Some people talk about wedding pictures or family albums or something sentimental like that, things that you can't replace. And I think what I would take if I were going on an adventure would be quite different. So maybe that's part of the difference too. We would take something different depending on where we're going, but also on whether we think we might get to come back or not. Imagine it was very hard for Hagar. But maybe she didn't have much choice in the matter. All she could do was tag along and see what happened. Maybe some of those skills helped her and Ishmael survive and thrive in the wilderness. Makes me much more appreciative of my own life, though. If you want to take some time to create something, or maybe to play another round of this game on your own, you can pause the video and do just that. I'm going to clean this up and get things ready for feast. Well, hello. I wonder what you created. It's time to say our prayers before we feast. It's always a good place to start with gratitude. Sometimes we say thank you prayer, prayer for others, the I'm sorry prayer, prayer for ourselves, prayer for the earth. You could even say something you're thankful for about yourself, about others, about the earth. We don't always say thank you to ourselves. Well, let's pray. And you can pray out loud or in your head, or you can sing or wiggle or dance your prayers. Some people like to write them out. You might want to pause the video so you, or if there are other people watching with you, can share a prayer together. When we're in the circle, sometimes we would do a squeeze prayer, and I would say a prayer and squeeze your hand, and you would say your prayers and squeeze mine. So we'll imagine that we're in a circle together, and we trust that God hears our prayers, no matter how they're offered or from whence they come. Thank you, God, for this beautiful day, for the crisp fall air, and for the time of rest that is winter in this earth. Help me mind my own times of rest and renewal. God, we give thanks for people who create warm, safe places for people. Thinking about the folks at the homeless shelter and all the volunteers and staff and funding agents and donors who make it a good place to be. And I give thanks for my warm and safe place, both here at work and at home, for a healthy body, for a mind that remembers stories and sometimes remembers what's on a tray when we play games, for the meal that we share, for the love that holds us. Amen. Amen. So I wonder if you've dressed up yet or if you even know what you're going to be for Halloween. My kids used to start talking about their costumes for next year, like the first week after Halloween. But I never got too excited because it would change 5 or 6 times before Halloween actually rolled around. I remember as a kid it was kind of hit and miss each year whether it would be a winter Halloween or a pleasant Halloween. We've been pretty lucky the last couple of years. But I know more than one year where I tried to fit a snowsuit or a parka underneath my costume. I don't imagine Hagar ever went trick-or-treating. I think she just would have been grateful to have something to eat each day. Never mind a bunch of candy. I think we take a lot of things for granted. At least when I hear this story. It makes me so much more appreciative of everything that I have. There's a twist to that question about what would you take? We do a lot of taking, at least in our culture. In Western and North America, in Alberta and Wetaskiwin. Maybe we need to start thinking about what would we give. Not just Halloween treats, but what do we give back to our community? How do we help out even in our family, in our household, doing those kind of boring and yet they have to be done chores? I wonder if we could see all of those things that we do as ways that we add goodness into the world. Or make God more visible. Someone shared a story with me that they had an acquaintance mention to them that they were one of the few people that when they made a mistake, they acknowledged it and said they were sorry. Even something as simple as that, right? When we make a mistake or we don't do something we were supposed to, not to make excuses, but just to say, I screwed up, I'm sorry. What do I need to do to fix it? Or here's what I can do to fix it. Is that enough? Think about the difference that might make in the world. That would be something to give back. Forgiveness. I wonder what you have to give. Everybody has something. You don't have to have superpowers, but you can make a super big difference in so many little ways. Sometimes they add up to big ways. We don't always notice that effect that we have. You're welcome if you need to take some more time to feast. But for now, I think it's time for us to say goodbye. And so watch what happens, so that the light isn't just in this one place and time, but can spread out to many places, be in many times. You might even think of the light as a bit of a blessing that goes around us and within us and holds us as the love of God does. There's a lot of light to enjoy in the change today. And it'll get thin. Eventually we won't be able to see it. But just because we can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. And so until we meet again, God bless, be well, and look after one another.